lift them to you and ask that you come to them where they are. Let them feel your presence also in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. You may be seated. What a lot to be thankful for this week. I'm excited about that. All right. Welcome, YouTube. Yes? Okay. All right. Next Sunday at 3 o'clock, Grace Southern Baptist, I will be at Courtyard. All right. Last week, we started a message, and I titled it The Perfect Invitation. And I didn't do point number 3. And I told you then that was okay with me because when I was preparing it, I felt like point number 3 was its own sermon anyway. So it was fine. All right. So anyway, so we are on part 2 of The Perfect Invitation. So a couple of things will be a quick review, but otherwise. All right. So this is from Matthew. It says, "Come all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." We think about this all the time when we think about rest. Last week we talked about how Jesus invites us all to come. He invites us to come and see, to come and follow him, come and rest in him, like we just read. He told us that it wouldn't be easy. He told us it was going to be a challenge. And so we can be prepared for that. But as I said last week, there is a reward at the end of that. So that was going to be point 3. Jesus invites us to come and rest. Now, my husband is one of the hardest working people I know. He can sleep anywhere. It's baffling to me. I came out. Sometimes he's out working in the yard and he takes a break and he goes into the garage because he's got a fan that sits right over the chair where he likes to sit out there in his little man cave. He's been to my house, he's seen it. So he's there in his chair and it's a tall like bar stool chair that sits next to a workbench kind of counter. He's leaned back in the chair a little bit with both feet propped up on the counter and crossed and sleeping. I said, "You know, you have a recliner inside for that." He said, "I was worried it was doing just fine right where I was." He is always sleeping in the most peculiar places. I have many pictures on Facebook because I like to harass him about it, but I didn't post any here for you. So, anyway, I cannot sleep just anywhere. I need just the right conditions. It has to be the right temperature. There has to be some air movement in the thing, and every tiny little sound wakes me up. And when I say every little sound, if my cat goes into the master bathroom and tries to drink from the toilet, I hear him going. Now you can imagine being married to a paramedic. That gets a little bit challenging at my house sometimes because there are sirens, tones at all hours of the night, waking me up and disturbing my peace. And once I'm awake, it's really hard for me to get back to sleep. But rest is very important. And Jesus also invited us to come and rest. Next month, in August, I'm going to take a week off of all my jobs. I can't tell you how excited I am about it. I'm not doing anything exciting. I'm going to a little tiny Airbnb in Greenville where there's nothing really happening, but it's a cute little Airbnb with lots of sunlight, and I plan to rest. Jesus offers a lot of opportunity for us to rest, and he invites others to come to him, and he warned them that it wouldn't be easy, like we said, and he called them to rest. And that's where we're going to be today. Mark chapter 6. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. They departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. Now, there's a lot more to this, and we're going to read it all. So if you will turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 6, I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on here. Here's our 3 points. There's an invitation to rest. There is the risk of not resting. And there is the reward when we rest in him. The invitation to rest. That's what we just read in those first couple of verses. So the apostles had just returned from healing and casting out demons and all kinds of things. And so if you can go back to the beginning of chapter 6, this is not where we're going to read, but in the beginning part of chapter 6, Jesus is rejected at Nazareth, and he sends out the 12 in verse 7. He says, and he called the 12 to himself and began to send them out 2 by 2, and he gave them power over unclean spirits. He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except the staff. And so then he gives them all the instructions for what they're supposed to do. And in verse 12 it says, so they went out and preached that people should repent. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. Then there's this little passage about the death and beheading of John the Baptist. And then we get to verse 30, where we're going to be today. And it says, then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. So a little bit before, Jesus says, go out and do this. And so they went and they did all these things, and they come back and they say, teacher, let me tell you what we did. Right? And so they're excited, and they're telling him about all the things that they have done for him, that he told them to go and do. And so they're giving him a report. And he said to them, we read, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. All right. So they returned. They were excited. They're telling him what else is going on, and he told them to come and rest. Jesus invites, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, right? But here he says they are to come away by themselves to a deserted place. This isn't just, go lay underneath the tree and take a nap. You've earned a break, right? Come away with me to a deserted place. Let's go away from the crowds, away from the noise, away from all the things that are happening. Come and rest. This is abiding rest. We've talked about that a lot before, right? So rest is important. Rest is vital to your body, for sure. But abiding is the kind of rest that we can have where we go in and we say, oh God, just refresh my soul, right? Refresh my spirit. Lift me up. I just want to be alone with you. Quiet all the noise, all the chaos, all the other stuff that's going on, and just be with God. This is the kind of rest that Jesus is calling them to. Rest is very important. Sleep is very important. You know, you will die without sleep. We know that if we don't drink water, we'll die. And if we don't eat food, we'll die. According to what I searched this morning, on average, you can live 30 days without, or you can live 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 11 days without sleep. So you can live approximately 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 11 days without sleep. This is dependent a little bit on your age, your health, and some other kind of things. You know, where are you when you're without water? If you're in the middle of a desert, you're going to get dehydrated a lot faster than other places. So there are some variables there. But before you die from a lack of rest, a lot of other things happen. You get a lot of inflammation in your joints, your brain starts to get a little foggy at first. Then you can actually, before you die from not getting enough sleep, you will actually lose your mind. So that's what will happen if you don't get enough rest. So it's very important. Jesus noted their need here, right? He looks at them and he says, there's all these people, and they're all over, and you have all been very busy, and you haven't even had time to eat. You don't have time to take care of yourselves. Come away and rest. Take a break, right? Stop. Come get ready, right? God built rest into all of creation. He created the heavens and the earth and the universe and all the things that are in them, and then he rested. As an example. And then he told us to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy, to rest, not just because, we worked hard all week and we have to have a day when it's all for ourselves, but so that we can take a day and refresh and focus on him and everything that he has done for us and what he has provided for us, right? So that we are, listen, I don't know about you guys. When I start thinking about all the things that God is doing for me in my life, I get very excited. You guys have seen me when I've had a particularly amazing worship time before I come to this church. I'm just a little bit goofy, I get very excited when I get to think about the amazing things that God is doing in my life. It just bubbles out of me. It can't not do that, right? And so when we take our time to focus on God, when we take a time away from all the work and all the chaos and all the noise, and we just put our eyes back on him, then we can get excited about the things that he's doing. And that's going to bubble and overflow and go out into all of the world around us. And then they're going to be like, I don't know what is going on with that girl, but right? But we have something to share. God will pour it into us so that we can overflow and pour it out. We are invited to rest. What if we don't? The next part of this passage in Mark chapter 6, this is what happens in verse 33 to 38. It says, but the multitudes saw them departing, and many knew him, Jesus, and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them and came together to him. All right, let's pause there for just a second. Jesus told the apostles, come away to a deserted place and rest. But all the people saw where they were headed. And they went, oh, look, they're going over there. Let's go, right? You can imagine that. If there's some famous person and their car is driving through town and they're going to end up at a certain place, everybody's going to go to that place. Well, that's what happened. All the people went to that place. And so they arrived before them and they came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. I want to talk about this for just a second. He was moved with compassion. My commentary notes noted that one of the reasons when it says they were like a sheep without a shepherd, it noted 3 things that would be the result of being a sheep with no shepherd, and they're listed up here. They would be bewildered and wandering. They don't know where they're going if they don't have a shepherd to lead them. They would be hungry because where they are, they're going to eat up all the grass. And then if there's no shepherd to lead them to fresh grass and clean water, then they have nothing left to eat. They will starve, right? And so they're going to go hungry. They cannot find shelter or safety on their own. The shepherd to protect them. So when Jesus saw the people and he was moved with compassion, it was because he said they were like sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus, being the perfect good shepherd, could not leave them there to starve, even though they were going to rest and they knew that there was a need for rest. So I want to make that clear because this is really important for what happens next. So, because he was moved, and because they were like sheep without a shepherd, he began to teach them many things. When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him, having not yet had the opportunity to rest. They came to him before they were tired from their journeys. They hadn't even eaten themselves. They were in need of rest, in need of a break. Jesus saw it. He identified it. He told them, come away with me. We'll rest. And then all the multitudes were there. And Jesus said, wait, hold on. Let's take care of these guys first. And his disciples were not super excited about that idea. His disciples came to him and said, this is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. right? Look, they're hungry. Send them away. Jesus said, but he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. You do it. They're here. They need you. And he said, and they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? Now, they had done some quick calculating, and according to my research, this is approximately 8 months worth of salary, right? So they're like, what do you want us to do about it? We don't have that kind of money. There's way too many people hanging around here. They're a little bit impatient at this point, right? We can understand that. But he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. Found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Now I'm going to pause there and show you a couple of important things. Have you ever been so tired that you can barely? Oh, listen, you know I have 4 jobs. That's not just because, that's just because that's how I do things. I have always had multiple jobs. And sometimes I wear myself out badly. What happens when you get really super tired? Irritated, right? You start snapping at people for no good reason. My poor children had to deal with so much tiredness when I was younger. There were just days when I just didn't even know how I was going to get through the day. Right? That's how these guys were feeling. They were very, very tired. This mom here on this picture. Any moms in here ever felt like this? She's on her phone, but you can see by the rest of that whole thing, she is just worn out, right? Let me show you the rest of this picture. Come on. There we go. I have made that 3 times. That is one tired, right? Just a heads up, I used this as an advertisement for the Birth to 3 program, and I only put a few words on it. At the top, I said, you are not alone. Or it said, we get it. And then at the bottom, it said, you are not alone. I got more response from moms enrolling in the program from that one thing than anything I've done in the 8 years I've been there. They looked at that picture and went, oh, yeah, they do. They know me. Right? This poor mom, she is so tired. Really important. All right. That's how the apostles were feeling. They were just exhausted. And so when Jesus is like, they said, listen, send all these people away. This would solve all the problems, right? All the people could go. They could go and get something to eat. We could go and rest. That wasn't Jesus' plan. They needed something. And Jesus was going to make sure that they had what they needed, and he was going to put the apostles to work doing it in spite of the fact that they were tired, and he knew they were tired. Yes, I know that you have needs. But first, we have this to do, right? I think the other thing to remember is he said, it says in there, he took compassion because they were sheep without a shepherd. Knew his apostles had a shepherd. They weren't going to starve. They weren't going to be lost and wandering. He was still with them. He was still carrying them, right? If he sent all those other people away, what were they going to do? The apostles, they were okay. These guys, they needed help. So he tells them, he says, you guys go and do it. I said, how are we supposed to do it? All right. In Jeremiah 6:16, it says, stand on the ways and see, and ask for the old paths where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find rest for your souls. This is God to the Israelites in Jeremiah. So he says, rest on what you know. Be secure in what you know. We can take rest and know that God is with us all the time. That he hasn't left us, he hasn't abandoned us. And when we are tired, when we are weary, when we feel like we can't keep doing this job that he's put us on this earth to do, we can rely on the fact that he is there right alongside of us, right with us. We're going to look at that more too. Jesus calls us to rest and to abide. Right, now, I am going to skip feeding the 5,000. That is not what I'm here to talk about today, even though it's a part of it. All right, we're going to jump over to verse 45. So you know what happened. They found the loaves and the fishes, and they brought them out, and Jesus prayed over them, and then he set them all down in groups of hundreds and fifties, and then he distributed all of the food, and he fed all of them, and they had 12 baskets of food left over. Now, anybody who has studied the book of Mark with me knows I will point out all the time, Mark's favorite word is immediately. That's what happens in verse 45. Immediately after this happens, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he sent the multitude away. Okay, so let's pause there. So now the people have been fed. They have been taught. They have, he's taken care of their needs. And now he gets back to the apostles and he says, all right, listen, you guys get in the boat. I'm going to send these guys away. I know you still need rest. Right? I haven't forgotten you. I haven't abandoned you. I haven't decided they're my favorites and I'm not paying attention to you anymore. Right? I see you. I know your need. Get in the boat. I'll go take care of these guys. That's the first thing. So he goes to send them away. In verse 46, it says, and when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. Now, the apostles are in the boat. Jesus is on the mountain praying. Jesus' disciples were very busy. They were tired. He encouraged them to rest. Their failure to rest led them to having a bad attitude. Right? While they were out doing all the things, they hadn't gotten sufficient rest. And instead of still doing the things that Jesus called them to do with a joyful heart, they got a bad attitude with the people that needed something. They had a bad attitude with somebody who needs something. Go back to that mom with those little kids. I promise you, that whole family was having a rough day. The kids were tired and crying. Mom was irritated because she was already tired and she just didn't have the energy for it anymore. And all those kids were just like, ah! Kids, doing what kids do. Mom's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How am I going to get through this day? Right? They had a bad attitude. They had a bad attitude. After the people were fed, after the sheep were cared for, Jesus made his disciples get in the boat. He sent them ahead of himself, and he stayed behind to manage the crowd, and then he went to pray. Sometimes we feel like God has abandoned us. We're out in the middle of the water. We're struggling and fighting. That's what happens next. That's what he says. Then, in verse 48, then he saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. Now, about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. Even though he was over there on the mountain praying, he was very aware of what was happening over there. Probably why he was praying. He was probably praying for their strength, for their protection, right? We have a great picture in John 17 of what Jesus' prayers looked like. It was all about taking care of them and his Father meeting their needs. I'm sure that didn't change when he was on the mountain. But we get into these positions in our lives where we feel like he's abandoned us. He's left us to deal with this on our own. Right? So the apostles have gone from, he says, come away with me to a deserted place. Oh, wait, we're taking care of these guys first. All right, you guys go. I'll take care of them. And now they're out there alone and struggling in the middle of the water. Wind is against them. They're fighting. They're wrestling through the whole thing. And they're like, where is that Jesus dude? What's going on? He just left us out here to fend for ourselves. We feel like that sometimes in our lives. We feel like he's abandoned us. We don't know where he is. We don't know what's going on. He's just left us here. But he never took his eyes off of them. He was praying for them. He was watching out for them. And when they needed him, he came, walking on the water. They felt like they were dealing with the storm alone. Here's what happened next. All right. In verse 49, it says, "And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost." The reason they supposed it was a ghost rather than a hallucination is because they all saw him. All right? Let's say that. All right. "For they all saw him and were troubled. But immediately he talked with them and said to them," my Bible says, "Be of good cheer," which I think is a ridiculous statement in this situation, and I'm going to tell you what it actually said. "It is I. Do not be afraid." Now, there are two very important details that I want to tell you about that sentence. Be of good cheer. It is I. Do any of you guys have a Bible that says something besides that? What's yours say? Take courage. Yeah, take courage. That's closer than be of good cheer, right? Take courage. Be brave. It's okay. Anybody else have anything else? All right. So that's what it means. Instead of be of good cheer, it was take courage. Don't be afraid. I'm here. That's not even the most important part of this sentence. At my house, one of the study helps that I use when I'm researching things, so I get everything all ready and go through all my notes and my commentaries. One thing that I like to do sometimes, just to make sure that I haven't missed any important details, is I have an interlinear Bible. And so what the interlinear does, anybody who doesn't know, my husband looks at it and he goes, "I don't know how you read that thing. That's chaos." So it has the original Greek with word-for-word translations to English, and then in the little narrow column, it'll have like the passage, how you would read it in your Bible. And the reason why it's one passage here and a word-for-word here is because when you go word-for-word, it doesn't translate clearly sometimes. The words are in a different order because it's word-for-word, so you can see what the original thing was. Let me tell you what this says in the interlinear. In the interlinear, it says, "Have courage, I am." In my Bible, it says, "It is I." In yours, it might say, "Here I am." It is I. I've got you. In interlinear, it says, "I am." Not like anything you might have heard before. I'll tell you why it's important. This idea right here, you can jump down to the last couple of verses. In verse 51 and 52, it says, "Then he went into the boat to them, and the wind ceased." Right? So he says, "Don't be afraid. I am." And the wind stops. Right? "And they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure, and they marveled." And here's why it matters that it really said, "I am." Because this last verse, "For they had not understood about the loaves because their heart was hardened." In the beginning of chapter 16, they were going around healing people, casting out demons, working miracles because Jesus sent them to do it. And in the end, we get this last little sentence that says they didn't understand what they had just seen. And so when he came out into the water and they were marveled because the waves stopped, Jesus was telling them who he was. That I am God, right? I am divine and human. I am the Messiah. This was God's words coming out of his mouth and saying, "And the seas." Because after everything they had seen and done, they still didn't understand who he was. How amazing is that? Do we do the same thing? Do we walk through our lives and we think that we know who God is? We think that we have an idea? Would we know him if we saw him? Would we see a thing and question whether it was really God or not? I mean, think about these things that were happening in the presence of these people. Yet they didn't understand. They didn't get the big picture. When life is overwhelming, Jesus calls us to rest in him. He stands by and he prepares the way. For all that they had seen and done, they did not understand who he was. We need to understand that he is working in, around, and through us all the time. All the time. We are never alone in the middle of the waves. Even when the waves are crashing, even when we feel like we don't know what's coming next, he has not left us. If we are his, he cares for us. He sees our needs. He knows what they are. And even if he's not answering that prayer right this second, he's doing what needs to be done, right? He didn't immediately take the apostles to go and rest. He had something that needed to be done first. And they needed to be a part of it so they could really understand who he was. Because he knew they didn't know that yet either. Right? Sometimes God has to reveal himself to us in new and interesting ways. He invites us to come and see. The apostles first started to follow him. He said, "What do you want?" Right? We want to see where you're still. Come and see everything that I have, everything that I'm going to do. Come and see why I'm here, what I came for. He invites all of us the same way. He knows there are risks and that they are great. And he's warned us all about them. Yet when we get in the middle of it, we start to question where he is. Right? He already told us it was going to be that way. We don't have to question it. We can know he saw it before it happened, and that means he's already there. Whatever that thing is that's scaring us, it doesn't need to, because he is already there in the middle of it. He already knew it. We can abide. We can rest in him. We can know that even if the waves are tossing us around, he's got this. He has not abandoned us. He's ready to walk us through if we will abide and rest in him. He will take us to exactly where he needs us to go. Exactly what he needs us to do, who he needs us to talk to, what he needs to teach us. He will take us to exactly where we need to be so that we can have a revelation of who he is. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much that you love us enough to go with us through whatever happens in our lives. God, I thank you that you saw it before it happened, that you were already there, that you've promised to carry us through, that you've given us a way, you've given us this amazing word to lead us and guide us. You've given us the Holy Spirit to empower us and to take us from this place to that one. And God, I ask as we go through this week that every single person who hears this message will begin to look for the ways where maybe they don't know you very well yet, where they need to learn more. I ask that you give them a new revelation of who you are and move in their lives, draw them nearer to you, and give them rest. Help them to understand that you have a way for them that is light and easy as you are doing the work. God, I just ask that they would have a new way to trust you. For those who are out in the universe and hear this message, God, I ask that you give them peace, comfort, and leading as well. If they've never heard this message before, God, speak into their hearts and show them who you are today as well. We lift up all of these as they go into their homes and their workplaces and to their families. I just ask that you give them courage and boldness and that you remind them of your will for their life this week. I ask all these things in Jesus' name. All right, YouTube, I'm going to turn this off because they like to talk. So everyone else, you all be blessed.